How would you respond to criticism that far-right-wing discourse, particularly online, is inflamed by organizations such as Turning Point USA and your rhetoric, even as you condemn attendance of neo-Nazis at your events?
I don't even know how to respond to that. I mean, how do I respond to critics that I'm inflaming tensions? If the truth inflames you, you have a problem. It's not my problem.
What do you see as the role of an...
Is she gonna respond to anything that he's saying? Maybe I'm inflaming tensions. She's not responding to anything that he's saying.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Our speaker tonight is Charlie Kirk, a prominent conservative commentator. He's founder and CEO of Turning Point USA, which has a presence on over 3,000 high school and college campuses. It is the largest and fastest growing youth activist organization in USA, and he's written 4 books. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, great to be here.
Brilliant, so I'll start with some questions from me, and then we're going to move to the questions from the audience, from the people who've submitted them, and who'll be asking them at the dispatch box. My first question is about Turning Point USA's Professor Watch List. Its mission is described as exposing college professors who discriminate against conservative students and advance leftist propaganda in the classroom.
So if you guys don't know what's going on here, Charlie Kirk is at Cambridge University speaking to the student union president about his conservative beliefs. This has been trending recently in the, I guess, political world, debate, whatevers. And I think these videos are really good because if you guys don't know, Cambridge University is objectively one of the most accomplished universities on the Western Hemisphere of the world. So the fact that he's here is saying something that I said Democrats need to start doing. They need to start going to universities. They need to start being more loud because conservatives do it. That's why Donald Trump won, if you were being honest. Conservatives are loud. They'll debate their views with anyone. They couldn't care less. Democrats, on the other hand, not so much. Nonetheless, my name is Jojo. I hope you guys enjoy this. Let's get into it.
With examples including feminism, abortion, and socialism. How would you respond to critics, such as PEN America, who see it as supporting what it claims to deride, which is the intimidation and ostracization of those who express controversial views on campus?
Well, we're getting right into it, aren't we? Thank you. So yeah, just by background, Turning Point USA has now grown to be the largest campus conservative organization in the country. I come from a view that conservatism is widely underrepresented in American campuses. And by conservatism, I literally mean the defense of Western values, free markets, rule of law, individual initiative, entrepreneurship, the Constitution, so on and so forth. And in American college campuses in particular, and I don't know, I'm guessing that this campus is, I don't even want to guess. We'll see what happens when we have dialogue. But I do know that there are some great professors that do teach the Western canon, which is far too missing from American universities, is that American college campuses have become a place where they strive to have everyone look different but think the same. And in America, university and college tuition is through the roof, and students and parents have a moral obligation to know who is teaching their kids. And for these professors that have such a major objection for being on our professor watch list, if they don't say obscene things, then they will not end up on our watch list. I'm talking about professors that were excited about what happened on October 7th. I'm sorry, if you're excited about what happened on October 7th, then you deserve to be on a professor watch list and people should know all about you. And if people want to fire you as a consequence of that, or if people don't want to go to that school as a consequence of that, then so be it. And so what was the criticism exactly?
It was that the watch list supports what it claims to deride, which is the intimidation and ostracization.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
sorry,
thank you. If the publicizing of certain ideas is intimidation, then I think that's just laughable. It is using our own free speech to expose professors who we believe are making America a worse country. And in fact, I believe in America, higher education has largely posed a threat to Western values. And I think we need more students and more parents to realize the moral rot that universities have become in the Western world.
So Turning Point Academy mentions the importance of promoting intellectual growth. How would you respond to critics that such an education system stifles intellectual growth through establishing a fixed set of values, for example, regarding God, life beginning at conception, and 2 genders, rather than promoting intellectual diversity?
Sure, I mean, at some point, you're going to have to get to a truth claim. So even to say that you want intellectual diversity means that you think intellectual diversity matters, but by what standard? So you have to actually at some point say that something is good. So if someone says, well, the criticism that you're going to tell a kid that something is good, something else, you should have intellectual diversity. Okay, why? By what standard? By what book? By what scholar? By what author? By what worldview? We believe, as a organization, that the West is the best for many reasons. In particular, my own personal views. I'm a Christian. I'm not ashamed of it. And Christianity brought to the world things that we all take for granted. Tom Holland, who actually was educated here and is one of the great classicists and taught himself ancient Greek, he wrote in his book Dominion that even if you hate Christianity, your critique of Christianity is actually using Christianity itself. And so this idea of intellectual diversity, I totally support that. And I think that students should read different books and should read different authors. At some point, though, the purpose of education is not to have an endless buffet line for students to sample every bad idea in the world. It's to point them to the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I think
So the fundamental aspect of what Charlie Kirk is saying is that universities are not teaching nationalism. When students leave college and when students leave school in general, they don't have a sense of pride in the United States and what our country is. And I would say he might be right. He might be right there. He might be right. The way schools are today, and I'm not just saying this blindly. I was in school for 5 years. I got a master's degree. Schools don't push you to be extremely nationalist on a wide scale level in the United States. I think my school personally did, but schools don't really push you in that direction. If anything, they're creating the opposite. So he's kind of piggybacking off of why there's so many student activists in the United States. He also mentioned the idea that schools are supposed to push you in the right direction. I'm assuming he's referring to socialist ideals and not like the STEM-based ideals, because everything he's saying is about subjective teachings and not objective teachings such as math, science, stuff like that. So he's talking about like history class and all those type of things. He also makes a point there because schools do push you in a direction. He just doesn't agree with the direction that schools are pushing it. Let me know what you guys think about that, because it is an interesting topic. I've never really deeply thought about like the direction like sociology classes and so on and so forth are pushing kids, because I can only imagine that would be extremely hard to be non-biased in those courses. So you might as well be biased in favor of the United States is what he's saying. Nonetheless, let's continue.
Lost what the purpose of education is. Education in Latin literally means to lead forth. To lead forth out of the cave was the original analogy. And so at Turning Point Academy, we take the biblical idea to train a child up in the ways in which they will go, and we make no apologies for instituting a belief that believing in God is better than secularism. The defense of universal human equality is a good for all humanity, amongst many other things that you articulated.
Of freedom, which is listed as Turning Point USA's mission on your website, with the restrictions on bodily autonomy, which you support, including abortion, trans-affirming healthcare, and birth control. And how would you respond to criticism of your limited view of freedom?
Sure. So first of all, birth control I don't have that strong of views of. So I mean, except for the fact that I've criticized how actually young women that take hormonal birth control might have side effects that are not always disclosed to them. As far as abortion and trans-affirming care, I'll get into that in a second, but I find it laughable, not from you, of course, but some of the people that are always very critical of, Charlie, why don't you just believe in bodily autonomy? I'm sorry, didn't you just mandate a vaccine for the last couple of years? I couldn't visit your country for 2 years because I didn't take a vaccine. So it's my body, my choice, unless so it's my body, my choice if it's another human being in the womb, but it's not my body, my choice if I want to take a vaccine. As a side note, though, all the bodily autonomy people, and you guys can laugh all you want, it's fine. All the bodily autonomy people suddenly got really silent when we decided to say, we're going to control your body and control the movement of what you can do. You can't go to the pub. You can't go to the local gathering of friends. You can't go to university. You can't even go into the UK if you don't have a card. So that's a fun contradiction for me. At the same time, there's a difference between freedom or liberty and license. Liberty is the pursuit of things that allow human beings to flourish at its highest possible potential. License is not those things. So on the first thing, you do not have a ability, and I'm sure there will be a question about this, under any agreed upon Western morality, which is derived from a Christian construct, to murder another human being. You do not have that freedom. And so we believe, obviously, because we believe in very basic biology and science, that life begins at conception, and therefore that life deserves universal human rights as derided, as applied equally under our laws. As far as trans-affirming care, as far as if you want to do something over the age of 18, knock yourself out. You guys actually have been better than our country on this. You have the Cass report that our country has lost its mind, where the Cass report itself issued an opinion based on my limited but somewhat understanding of it that trans-affirming care for children is highly questionable at best. And so we all can agree that students that are not, or young people that are not yet of age or mature age of 18, of course we limit certain freedoms or licenses or liberties for 15-year-olds. In my country, they can't own guns till they're 18. In my country, they can't even drink till they're 21. In my country, they can't vote until they're 18 in America. And so until someone is of age, you're going to limit that. And so I believe that we should all agree that young people in particular, 15, 16, 17, there should be a prohibition that you should not be able to cut off your breasts or go under life-altering, irreversible, gender-affirming care just because you might be going through a temporary phase.
So Turning Point USA acquired Students for Trump in 2019.
So I'm assuming this is an interview because she's not even really responding to anything that he's saying. I thought she was going to, give her opinions on this, but she's just asking him what he believes. We all know what he believes. That's why people probably clicked this video. They saw his face. So I do hope she does say something eventually, but maybe she just agrees with him. But let's continue.
And worked on targeting students on college campuses, especially ahead of the 2020 election. However, despite an increase in youth turnout in 2020, Trump's support was worse with young people in several battleground states than 2016. How would you respond to critics who claim that this failure was partly due to Trump outsourcing youth outreach to Turning Point USA?
How did he do this last election?
His support was better in youth, but it was still lower lower amongst youth than the Democrat support was.
We won the youth vote in the state of Michigan, and we ran basically the entire youth operation in 2024. In fact, anyone can look on ChatGPT, Grok, or Google. Whatever you want, we crushed the youth vote. Even Democrats acknowledge it. There's story after story after story. Why are young people moving so far to the right? And so, will you give me credit for that?
Why do you think that, in several key states, even in 2024, amongst the young people, we did
anywhere between 10 to 25 points better in the key battleground states. This is not just conjecture, it is material fact. Both young men and young women moved to the right dramatically. In America, young people are Donald Trump's most loyal cohort, not even baby boomers. According to the Yale Youth Poll and the Harvard Youth Poll, Donald Trump has actually made the most gains amongst younger voters. And I guess maybe something we did had something to do with that.
And what do you see as the future of conservatism amongst young people?
I think it's going to be the dominant, God willing, dominant worldview amongst young people in America, and it's ascendant. Again, what we are seeing in the States, and I don't know if it's the case here in the UK, young men in particular are on pace to be the most conservative generation in history, and it's an exciting trend, and we're leaning into it. We see this in the macro trends. We also see this micro. Young women are following suit. There's kind of two Gen Zs. There's Gen Z that was basically out of college or near end of college at COVID, and then there was Gen Z that was in high school. What would the equivalent term here be in high school? Whatever you call.
Yeah,
okay. And they had their lives obliterated. Those are the most formative times of their life, 15, 16, 17, 18. They were forced to wear masks. They had to do school through Zoom. They saw friends that, many of whom that took their life are.
Nah, he's kind of right, bro. I was that second generation of Gen Z. Second generation, bro. I remember when COVID hit, it was terrible. I did not have a senior year of college. I didn't say that. I did not have a senior year of high school. It was no prom. I didn't even have a graduation. None of that. No graduation. No prom. I did not have a freshman year in college. We were basically inside the house for 2 years. 2 years. It was terrible. Life was better before. Prices were lower. I remember. Me and my dad used to go to a basketball game every single year for my birthday. Every single year. And we went to the game right before, it was shut down for COVID and stuff. Now, the prices are higher now than they were back then. And my favorite basketball team was better back then than they are now. And the prices are triple the price. Everything is up. Everything. Bro, it's crazy to see. Wow. Anyways, let's continue.
Suicide rates went up exponentially. And also on top of that, we had this insane race stuff in America during 2020, otherwise known as Floydapalooza, where we decided to burn our country because a guy drug overdosed on the streets of Minneapolis. And that's true, he did drug overdose, not just my opinion, just read the medical examiner report, the Hennepin County medical examiner report. And so then all of a sudden we decided to like commit cultural suicide and throw statues. By the way, in London, they like threw a statue into the river or something because we're systemically racist. I'm sorry, our two countries are the two least racist countries ever to exist in the history of the world. And you guys should also be thanking the Lord that you have someone like William Wilberforce to look up to, and you should be building statues to Wilberforce, not taking down statues of your history, because it's thanks to Western values that we abolished slavery, and the world is a profoundly better place because of that worldview, and we as conservatives are unafraid to tell that story and that truth.
So you've condemned the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as a huge mistake.
Correct.
Why do you believe it was a mistake to pass anti-discrimination legislation? And what do you think would be better policy for being treated fairly and equally, which you see as an American principle?
Yeah, nothing against the intent, but it was too broadly written and it played into something called disparate impact. Disparate impact was woven within the Civil Rights Act, and disparate impact basically says if two racial groups have different outcomes, the answer must be racism. It does not allow any legal nuance. So there are four components to, quote unquote, the anti-racist regime of America. I don't pretend to know what goes on in this country. I could just talk about America. I'm sure that's fine. And it's four components: affirmative action, critical race theory, DEI, and disparate impact.
One thing I will say about this specific thing is that Charlie Kirk, I'm not going to say he's right, but I can definitely see where he's coming from. Because think about it, y'all. Think about it. There be issues in society. For example, an issue for the black community is that a lot of black kids don't go to college. They don't go to college, and when we get older, our income is lower. People automatically assume that that's because of racism. And I'm like, where are y'all getting this information from? Because if it was because of racism, wouldn't this same racism also affect all the black communities, not just African American? Wouldn't it also affect the Nigerian American, Ghanaian Americans, Cambodian Americans? Wouldn't it affect everyone? Why does it only affect one subsector of black people in the United States? And the reason I bring that up is because this happens all throughout society where, don't get me wrong, racism still exists, obviously. Racism as a concept obviously exists. But when you call every single issue racism just because it affects a certain race, that's when things start getting disingenuous. That's why affirmative action went to the Supreme Court. That's literally the reason. Because people looked at college admissions and they assumed just because black people weren't going to these Ivy League schools that we were being targeted because of racism, when that just wasn't the case. Other students just had higher scores. That's the reason why we were misrepresented or underrepresented in these schools. The same way as if you look at professional sports, black people are extremely overrepresented in professional sports. Imagine if someone went to the Supreme Court because there was too many black people in the United States. Too many black people in the NBA. That would be insane. The only point that I'm getting at, is that racism obviously exists. But you just can't point every single issue that affects a community to it being racism.
Those are the kind of the four components. All of them have their subsection. The Civil Rights Act led the way to affirmative action, which is weaponized, quote unquote, reverse racism against Asian and white people. And the Civil Rights Act also blazed the trail for disparate impact as a legal theory, basically saying that if black Americans are doing worse in a group, it might not be because of marital differences or cultural differences or single motherhood issues. It must be racism. And so because of that, the Civil Rights Act was too broadly written. It's now being applied in my country as a way to get rid of voter integrity, to get rid of election integrity, get rid of voter ID. So the intent, it should have been a single page or a 2-page bill to say that you cannot discriminate against based on the color of somebody's skin, period, end of story. Instead, we get a multiple 100-page bill with lots of chapters and lots of lesser known amendments that created basically a permanent anti-racist bureaucracy within our federal government to go find racism where it doesn't exist and create it new places where otherwise did not exist.
So you've described Martin Luther King Jr. as awful. not a good person, even though many conservative commentators have spoken in support of what he says, including his quote, where they will be judged about his children, where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Statement. He was right there.
So does his speech and his general ethos not then agree with your views on DEI?
Well, I've complimented him as well, but I mean, first of all, he was a personally morally flawed man. And to be fair, a lot of people I sometimes look up to are morally flawed. But also, I mean, we're all morally flawed. We're all sinners. I would hope actually, many of you probably don't believe in God, so never mind. Look, Martin Luther King, in a lot of different ways, had a promise of a colorblind America. I don't want to go too deep into this, because I don't know how, maybe it's very interesting to UK students about MLK, but there is a mythology around MLK that does not warrant the reverence that he gets treated with in America. Should he be mentioned amongst lots of people in the 20th century that was complicated and at the end of his life advocated for a more communistic view and then actually got away from race blindness and actually got towards race obsession? I'm totally cool with that. He did some great things. He did some things that were not so great. In America, though, you must understand, he is looked to as the new founding father. The main contention that I have with the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement and how it ended, not how it started, is that we refounded the country fundamentally. We cast aside our founding roots and our founding documents, the US Constitution, and we decided to basically usher in the Civil Rights Act as a new anti-racist dogma, creed, and I find something fundamentally wrong with that. Our birth certificate as Americans is the Declaration, and the law of the land is tied with the US Constitution. It was not the Civil Rights Act. And so with all of that to say, we have a national holiday to MLK. We got rid of a national holiday for our first president and our founding father, George Washington. We used to call it Washington's birthday. Now we call it President's Day in our country. So that's just maybe some context to answer that question.
So you tweeted ahead of the January 6th Capitol attack.
Bro, can she respond to anything that he's saying, bro? She's not responding to anything that he's saying. She's literally just asking him questions. He's answering them, and she's just immediately changing the subject. Immediately changing the subject. She didn't rebuttal or even agree or anything with anything that he's saying. I don't know how she feels about him. She's just asking him questions. Isn't that kind of weird? Imagine you go to an interview and they don't even really acknowledge what you say. They just ask you questions, you answer it, then they just ask you more questions. That's weird. It's weird. It's strange.
That Turning Point USA and Students for Trump was sending more than 80 buses of patriots to DC to fight for this president, although it ended up being 7. Do you see your claims, including that the election was stolen, as contributing to January the 6th?
I mean, it's somewhat of an irrelevant question, but no, of course not. In fact, our students were the ones that didn't even go to the Capitol and peacefully went home. But I mean, how deep into January 6th do you want to get? It wasn't an insurrection by any means whatsoever. There were some people that acted totally improperly, and they should not assault police officers or break windows. But there were also a lot of people that walked into the Capitol building and the doors were open for them, and they walked between the queued lines that were there and said a prayer. And these are the people that walk around with pocket constitutions, and they were smeared in the largest witch hunt and manhunt, I should say, the largest manhunt in American law enforcement history that resulted in 1,300 arrests of non-violent offenders that walked into the People's House in the United States Capitol building, while violent crime rose in almost every major city in the country. And so I don't know how much, maybe I'm sure there'll be a question on January 6th. So.
You've compared same-sex sexual behavior to drug and alcohol use and described it as an error and said you don't agree with the lifestyle. How would you justify these comments whilst also speaking about welcoming gay people into the conservative movement?
Well, first, we all have flaws. That's number one. But number two, how do I justify it? It doesn't matter what Charlie Kirk believes. That's a view derived from Scripture. And so the Bible talks very clearly about God's natural order. We see this reflected in the natural law. Some of my closest friends and closest people that work with me alongside of Turning Point USA participate in a same-sex lifestyle, and that's their own prerogative. But if you ask me what I believe and why I believe it, it's derived straight from Scripture.
And you've spoken of marriage as between one man and one woman, even whilst polls have consistently shown most Americans as in support of same-sex marriage. How would you respond to critics regarding your position on this?
I don't derive my morality from up or down vote.
How would you respond to criticism that far-right-wing discourse, particularly online, is inflamed by organizations such as Turning Point USA and your rhetoric, even as you condemn attendance of neo-Nazis at your events?
I don't even know how to respond to that. I mean, how do I respond to critics that I'm inflaming tensions? If the truth inflames you, you have a problem. It's not my problem.
What do you see as the role of an...
Is she going to respond to anything that he's saying? Maybe I'm inflaming tensions. Maybe I'm inflaming tensions right now. She's not responding to anything that he's saying. Is she like... maybe I'm confused on what type of video this is supposed to be. Usually what happens is that he says something and then the other person responds. And I think he's also confused. We're all just confused, right? What is this? I'm ending this. I'm ending this video. If you guys have any suggestions for me, my name is Jojo, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.